1942. Deep inside the quiet English countryside, far from the main roads and hidden behind layers of secrecy, a small facility pulsed with quiet urgency. Inside, a circle of British engineers stood around a workbench. At first glance, it looked ordinary. Just heaps of dull, dusty coal scattered across the table. But if anyone outside SOE's inner circle had stepped into that room, they would have realized instantly that something was terribly off. Because these were not pieces of coal. They were weapons. Ingenious, lethal, beautifully disguised weapons, designed to slip into the German war machine unnoticed. These fake chunks of fuel were built to be so perfectly convincing that a tired railway worker, a rushed stoker, or a German sentry on coal-loading duty would shovel them straight into a locomotive firebox without the slightest suspicion. And when that happened, when the coal met flame, the result was catastrophic. The disguised charge would detonate inside the furnace, rupturing the locomotive's pressurized boiler. In a fraction of a second, thousands of pounds of force would rip outward, turning an entire train into a twisted carcass of iron and steam. No warning, no timer, no fingerprints to trace, just another mechanical failure German investigators couldn't explain. Before we go deeper into this story of silent sabotage, make sure to subscribe, because the deeper we travel into the hidden war, the stranger and more dangerous the inventions become. This is a story of SOE's explosive coal, one of the simplest yet most devastating weapons of deception Britain ever produced. And to understand why British intelligence needed to build something so bizarre, you have to understand how utterly dependent Nazi Germany had become on railways. By 1941, the German war machine straddled nearly an entire continent. From the beaches of Brittany to the forests of Ukraine, from Norway's frozen ports to the outskirts of Moscow, Germany controlled a landmass so massive that only one transportation system could keep it alive: trains. The Deutsche Reichsbahn, along with vast networks seized from conquered nations, carried everything: armored divisions, ammunition crates, fuel supplies, rations, spare parts, even entire factories stripped from occupied territory. Road convoys burned fuel far too quickly, fuel Germany never had enough of. Railways were the arteries of the Third Reich, and those arteries ran on coal, mountains of it. But this dependency also created a rare weakness. If the British could eliminate enough locomotives, German logistics would begin to suffocate. Supplies would slow, troops would stall. Entire offensives could collapse before they even began. The problem was simple. Locomotives were incredibly hard to destroy. Rail lines could be repaired within a day. Bridges were heavily guarded. And traditional sabotage, laying charges, wiring detonators, sneaking past patrols, forced resistance fighters to risk their lives again and again. Many died before achieving anything. Britain needed a new method, a method that didn't require complex training, a method safe enough for civilians and resistance members with almost no technical skill, a method that could be deployed anywhere coal was piled high, a weapon that destroyed locomotives from the inside. The answer emerged from a series of secret SOE research centers scattered across Hertfordshire. Among them, one stood above the rest, Station 12, housed at Aston House near Stevenage. Originally based at Bletchley Park, the unit had been forced to relocate in November 1940 after loud explosives tests disrupted the codebreakers working only a few buildings away. Under the leadership of Colonel Leslie Wood, Station 12 evolved into SOE's primary manufacturing hub. During the war, it produced more than 12 million time pencil detonators, over 38,000 limpet mines, and hundreds of other bizarre, innovative tools of irregular warfare. But among these inventions, few were as quietly brilliant as the lumps of explosive coal. The challenge seemed simple: make a bomb look like a rock. But perfection was mandatory. The device had to survive long rail trips, rough shoveling, cold storage, and human handling without accidentally detonating. Yet, once it reached the roaring firebox of a German locomotive, It needed to explode with absolute certainty, and achieving that balance pushed SOE engineers to their limits. British engineers eventually cracked the challenge of making a bomb that looked and felt like an ordinary lump of coal. Their solution combined precise engineering, plastic explosive, and some of the most creative camouflage work of the entire war. Each piece of fake coal carried roughly a quarter-pound of Nobel 808 plastic explosive. To the touch, it resembled a slightly waxy, greenish clay. It even carried a faint almond-like smell, an unfortunate natural trait of many nitro-based compounds. Nobel Chemicals had developed this explosive specifically for clandestine work, stable enough to transport, powerful enough to shatter metal under pressure. Every device also contained a number 27 detonator and a heat-sensitive ignition fuse. Once the disguised coal was shoveled into a locomotive firebox, the intense blast of heat didn't just burn it, it activated the fuse, which in turn triggered the detonator and main charge. The quarter-pound explosive alone could snap cast iron, but the true devastation came from what followed, the violent rupture of a locomotive steam boiler. These boilers operated under several hundred pounds per square inch of pressure. When suddenly breached, the stored steam unleashed itself in a split second, shredding the locomotive from the inside out. Boilers didn't simply crack, they detonated, hurling metal dozens of meters and turning entire engines into piles of twisted steel. But designing this weapon was only half the battle. Producing it was a long evolution. The first attempts were crude but promising. Engineers began by drilling directly into authentic lumps of coal using a serrated metal tube roughly 6 inches long. They then packed the hollowed cavity with plastic explosive, inserted a detonator, and sealed the opening with coal dust mixed into a primitive adhesive. Arthur Christie, a laboratory assistant at Station 12, was the one who carried out many of these early trials. He later described how difficult this method truly was. Coal, despite its tough appearance, is brittle. Many pieces simply shattered under drilling pressure, wasting both time and material. It was clear that mass production would be nearly impossible this way. The breakthrough came not from traditional military engineers but from the world of filmmaking. Station 15, located at the thatched barn in Borehamwood, was home to SOE's camouflage section under Lieutenant Colonel Elder Wills. Before the war, Wills had worked as a film art director, and when the war began he brought hundreds of set builders, prop designers, painters, mold makers, and craftsmen into SOE. Among them was Wally Bull, who decades later would work on 2001: A Space Odyssey. Bull developed a method that changed production forever: molded explosive coal. He used dyed Herculite plaster, forming each coal in a clamshell mold, then coating the surface in genuine crushed coal dust to create the correct texture and shine. These artificial shells eliminated every problem caused by drilling. They were strong, light, and could be produced consistently in large quantities. The final evolution encased the explosive core in a thin metal shell, over which liquid plaster was poured and allowed to harden. After drying, the piece was rolled in finely sifted coal dust. This method removed any visible seams and produced fake coal that even experienced workers could not distinguish from real fuel. And because coal differed drastically across Europe, SOE developed several versions. Coal was not just black. Lignite was soft, light, and brownish. Anthracite was hard, glassy, and nearly jet black. Bituminous coal came in grays and deep blacks with varying shine. SOE made molds for each type, ensuring their devices could blend into coal piles from France to Poland without raising suspicion. Between 1941 and 1945, SOE manufactured about 3.5 tons of explosive coal. Given the weight of the explosive inside each unit, historians estimate between 6,000 and 14,000 individual devices were created. Moving these weapons into occupied territory required one of Britain's most dangerous airlift operations. RAF Special Duties squadrons operating out of RAF Tempsford, including 138 Squadron and 161 Squadron, flew modified Halifaxes, Sterlings, and Lysanders deep into enemy territory. Their missions: deliver agents and supply resistance networks with weapons, radios, explosives, and sabotage tools. By the end of the war, these squadrons had flown over 13,500 sorties, dropping more than 10,000 tons of equipment. Explosive coal traveled alongside pistols, ammunition, radios, medical kits, and coded dispatches. The French resistance received the largest allocations. SOE deployed 470 agents into France between 1941 and 1944, creating a vast network capable of continuous sabotage. Belgium, Norway, Poland, and Yugoslavia also received shipments. Tito's partisans, who constantly targeted German railway lines, found the devices especially valuable. And here the story takes a strange turn. Despite producing tons of explosive coal, the historical record contains almost no confirmed cases of its use, no named operations, no specific dates, no recorded locomotive kills that can be definitively tied to these devices. At first glance, this seems like failure. In reality, it is the strongest proof the weapon worked exactly as intended. Explosive coal was built for deniability. A successful attack left nothing recognizable behind. No fragments, no casing, no timer, no trigger. The target simply exploded. German investigators chalked such incidents up to mechanical failure. Even decades later, railway sabotage across Europe was so extensive, and SOE's records so heavily destroyed or still classified, that matching individual explosions to specific methods became impossible. The French resistance struck hard at the German rail network, conducting over 1,800 attacks on locomotives between June 1943 and May 1944. They used anything they could get their hands on: detonators, time pencils, limpet charges, derailment kits, and, yes, explosive coal. It was only one tool among many, but its mere existence changed the psychology of warfare. Because once the whisper spread that coal piles might be seeded with disguised explosives, Germany faced a nightmare scenario. A choice with no good outcome. Either they accepted the terrifying risk of sudden boiler detonations, explosions that could obliterate an entire locomotive, cripple supply lines, and kill entire crews without warning. Or they pulled thousands of soldiers away from frontline duties to guard coal stages, depots, river barges, and factory storage bins across all of occupied Europe. Both options were disastrous. Letting the danger continue meant unpredictable losses. Guarding the fuel source meant stripping men from an overstretched army already fighting on too many fronts. Worse still, the Germans knew this danger wasn't theoretical, because they had developed their own version of the weapon. In June 1942, a covert German mission, Operation Pastorius, landed 8 Abwehr-trained saboteurs on American shores. Their kit contained TNT, detonators, cash, and plastic explosive formed to resemble lumps of coal. Their objectives included power plants, railway infrastructure, and industrial targets across the United States. But the mission collapsed almost instantly. All 8 agents were captured before carrying out a single attack, betrayed by internal mistakes and FBI surveillance. After this embarrassment, Germany never attempted a similar infiltration of the American mainland again. Still, the operation proved something important. Even Germany recognized the value of sabotaging coal-based transportation. The British double agent Eddie Chapman, better known as Agent Zigzag, provided one of the clearest insights into Germany's own coal bomb design. In March 1943, Chapman's Abwehr handlers handed him 2 German-made explosive coal pieces and ordered him to sabotage the merchant ship City of Lancaster. Chapman, loyal only to MI5, turned the devices over to the ship's captain, who sent them straight to British intelligence for analysis. The results were telling. Germany was still hollowing out real coal pieces. Their fuses were less reliable. Their camouflage was cruder. Their technology lagged behind British innovations by months, if not years. SOE's molded, carefully color-matched, seam-free designs were far superior. Britain had industrialized deception. Germany was still improvising. The United States quickly recognized the effectiveness of disguised explosives, too. Under Stanley Lovell, the OSS Research and Development Branch created an American version known as Black Joe. Instead of Nobel 808, they used a 60-40 pentolite mix, highly stable, extremely destructive. But the OSS went even further. They created full coal camouflage kits complete with color-matching paints, brushes, surface scrapers, texture tools. Agents could fine-tune each device to blend with local coal piles in Europe or Asia. Even without confirmed operational logs, both the SOE and OSS clearly saw the weapon's potential. Even if individual explosions were impossible to document, the broader campaign of railway sabotage produced staggering effects. French resistance operations slashed German rail traffic by 60% between March and June 1944. 486 coordinated attacks around D-Day prevented German armored divisions from reinforcing Normandy. In Yugoslavia, maintaining rail transport required such enormous manpower that one German general admitted it created massive problems and overwhelming security burdens. Security duty on trains became so dangerous that German commanders used it as a form of punishment. Many soldiers preferred frontline combat over guarding supply lines targeted by invisible saboteurs. And that was the power of explosive coal. Its strength wasn't only in physical destruction, but in fear. The fear that any lump of coal could be the last thing a railway worker ever touched. The fear that any barge shipment could become a fireball. The fear that Germany's own infrastructure might betray them without warning. Whether explosive coal was responsible for 10 destroyed locomotives or 100 hardly mattered. It contributed to the atmosphere of uncertainty that suffocated the occupation. Military engineers noticed something crucial. Destroying track delayed trains for a day. Destroying locomotives halted entire railway systems for weeks or months. A single locomotive required thousands of labor hours to replace. A single track repair took a few wooden ties and a repair crew. SOE's explosive coal helped shift the strategy from cutting track to destroying the engines themselves. And that concept, targeting critical irreplaceable components, became a foundation for post-war covert operations. After 1945, the idea spread. CIA historical reviews note that during the early Cold War, both sides still relied heavily on coal. It is likely, though not yet proven, that explosive coal, or its Cold War descendants, played roles in covert sabotage far beyond Europe. Station 15's legacy expanded into exploding logs, booby-trapped dead animals, mine charges disguised as rocks or animal droppings, modern IEDs. Hidden in everyday items. Every disguised explosive device used in conflicts today owes something to those early designs created in quiet workshops in Hertfordshire. Surviving examples of SOE's explosive coal can still be found in museums. The Imperial War Museum preserves molds, prototypes, and even 16mm test footage shot at Station 17 by Cecil Clarke. The International Spy Museum in Washington holds both British and German versions. The Museum of World War II in Massachusetts keeps several samples in pristine condition, but the most important evidence of the weapon's success remains invisible, because that was the design. No shattered casing, no timer, no blasting cap fragments, just a locomotive torn apart by mechanical failure. In a hidden facility in 1942, British engineers created a weapon so elegantly disguised that even its victories vanished into history. A weapon so psychologically disruptive that Germany made inferior copies without ever finding a countermeasure. A weapon measured not by confirmed kills, but by fear, by manpower diverted, by the constant suspicion injected into every coal pile across Nazi-occupied Europe. 3.5 tons produced, thousands of devices delivered, countless explosions misattributed, forgotten, or buried in wartime chaos. SOE explosive coal was unconventional warfare at its most brilliant. It turned Germany's dependency into its weakness. It weaponized the ordinary. It struck from within. And it all began with a quarter-pound of plastic explosive hidden inside something a German soldier would pick up with his bare hands. That was British ingenuity. That was SOE. And that was how fake coal helped fracture the Third Reich from the inside out. If you enjoyed this deep, cinematic breakdown of Britain's hidden weapons, hit the like button, subscribe for more Secret War stories, and drop a comment telling me which covert weapon you want decoded next.